Clear your locker and hand over the narcotics codes. I already told everyone you stole from this clinic, and by noon your brother will be running it, my mother Colleen said while mourners were still eating pound cake after my father's memorial. She stood in the treatment room doorway in a black dress that still smelled faintly of expensive perfume and church incense. Her pearls were perfect. Her lipstick was perfect. Her timing was perfect. That was my mother's favorite kind of cruelty, the kind that arrived dressed for company. Beyond her shoulder, the waiting room was still full. Clients from the town, old friends of my father, 2 rescue volunteers, the bank manager who had handled our business line for years, and a deputy Colleen had somehow managed to invite before the coffee urn went cold. My brother Dylan leaned against the controlled drugs cabinet with his arms folded, performing sadness for the room, and victory for himself. I did not look at my mother first. I looked at the black screen on the cabinet. Behind that screen sat 6 weeks of fingerprint logs, access times, inventory reports, and my brother's slow, stupid collapse. Then I set the clinic tablet on the counter and said, "If you are going to do this, keep everyone here." That startled her. "What?" I picked up a paper cup, took a sip of stale coffee, and repeated it. "Keep everyone here. If I am about to lose my name, my license, and my father's clinic in one morning, I would rather not make anyone leave early." For 1 second I saw the tiny flicker behind her eyes. She thought grief had made me numb. She thought silence meant surrender. People like my mother always mistake composure for weakness, because if they were calm in a moment like that, it would only mean they had already won. Dylan laughed softly. "Hear that," he said to the deputy. "She is not even denying it." I finally looked at him. 31 years old, broad shoulders, good cheekbones, a tie hanging loose at the neck like a prop from a more responsible man's life. My family had spent 3 decades mistaking charm for character. I had stopped making that mistake when I was 12. My father used to say that a clinic runs on 3 things: clean hands, clear records, and the person who shows up when nobody wants to. In our family, I was always the one who showed up. Dylan was the one people waited for anyway. When I was 10, Dylan forgot to latch the back kennel, and one of our boarded labs got loose and tore through the neighboring azalea beds. I spent 4 hours chasing that dog in church shoes while Dylan sat on the clinic roof eating crackers and crying that he did not mean it. My mother hugged him when it was over. She told me to apologize to the neighbor because I was older and should have watched him better. When I was 16, Dylan backed my father's truck into a delivery van and swore I had left the parking brake wrong. My mother made me use my college savings to help cover the insurance gap because Dylan had a baseball showcase that weekend and did not need the distraction. When I was 28 and halfway through veterinary school, Dylan borrowed the clinic credit card for 1 emergency diesel fill-up and used it to cover a weekend at a horse track with 3 men who wore too much cologne and no visible employment. I paid that bill too. My mother cried and said families survive by protecting their weaker members. What she meant was that my future was flexible and Dylan's comfort was not. By the time my father got sick, the pattern was older than the paint on the kennel doors. My father, Reed Mercer, built Mercer Animal Clinic from a converted feed store on the edge of Beaufort County. The front half became an exam room, surgery suite, pharmacy, and cramped office. The back opened into 12 indoor runs, a fenced exercise yard, and a boarding barn we added when I was in college. He worked with his hands. He believed in ledger books. He believed in paying the feed supplier before buying a new truck. He believed in me. My mother believed in the story she liked best, and in her version, Dylan was always 1 promotion, 1 idea, 1 lucky turn away from becoming the son she had bragged about all his life. He drifted through jobs, real estate seminars, fishing charter schemes, and a brief attempt to breed designer bulldogs that ended with 3 sick puppies and a refund I paid out of my own checking account. Then my father got pancreatic cancer, and time stopped pretending to be generous. For 18 months, I ran the clinic while finishing my licensing hours, managing surgeries, handling late-night emergencies, boarding anxious dogs whose owners were on deployment, and driving my father to oncology appointments in Charleston. Dylan showed up when there were cameras, casseroles, or checks. My mother showed up when there was someone new to blame. 6 months before my father died, we started losing controlled medication in amounts too small to trigger a panic and too regular to be a coincidence. A vial, short here. Another there. My father did not accuse anyone. He just watched. Then he upgraded the cabinet. The new unit used fingerprint access, individual staff profiles, automatic timestamps, and cloud backup inventory reports. Dylan complained the system was insulting. My father said if accountability felt insulting, that was probably the point. A week later, Dylan asked me to add his thumbprint, because he said boarding emergencies happened after hours, and he needed access if a dog seized or a horse injured itself. I told my father. He looked tired for a long time and said, "Add him. I want the machine to tell me what people never will." That sentence stayed with me. 3 days before he died, my father asked me to bring him the clinic charter, the deed folder, and the old brass key to the firebox in his office. He could barely sit up in the hospital bed. His skin looked almost translucent against the sheets. But his voice was clear. "You keep showing up, Mara," he said. "So I am putting the clinic where it belongs." I told him not to talk like that. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Listen to me. Your mother will try to turn grief into paperwork. Dylan will turn it into a handout. Do not race them. Let them commit first." Our attorney Vivian Duval came to the hospital that afternoon. She stayed behind the curtain with my father for 40 minutes. When she left, she handed me a sealed packet and said only this: "If anyone tries to force a transfer, a confession, or a criminal report against you, call me before you call anyone else." I put the packet in the clinic safe and waited. Now my father was buried. The memorial flowers were still fresh in the front room, and my mother had made her move before the parking lot emptied. The deputy shifted near the door. "Mrs. Mercer reported missing controlled substances and requested a formal statement," he said. "If there is a misunderstanding, now is the time." "There is no misunderstanding," Colleen said. Her tone changed instantly, softening for the audience. "My daughter has been under a terrible strain. She adored her father, but she has never handled pressure well. Dylan found the inventory discrepancies this morning. Rather than destroy her career, we are trying to transition the clinic quietly inside the family." Inside the family. I almost admired the phrasing. It made theft sound like casserole etiquette. Dylan straightened and stepped forward with a stack of printed inventory sheets. He had highlighted lines in yellow like a child decorating a lie. 8 ketamine vials missing over 6 weeks, he said. 3 midazolam. 2 buterphenol. Enough to ruin the clinic. Enough to cost us our insurance. Enough to get animals hurt if she is using on the job. A murmur moved through the waiting room. I caught sight of Mrs. Alvarez, who boarded her diabetic terrier with us every summer. She looked at me with confusion, not fear, yet just that first sinking turn when a person you trusted is being described in a language you do not recognize. That was the real violence of what my mother was doing. She was not just trying to strip me of property. She was trying to separate me from the town that had watched me kneel in mud to save a foaling mare, sleep on a kennel cot beside a dog recovering from torsion and stitch lacerations at 2 a.m. while Dylan slept off a bourbon. Habit I was apparently supposed to call charm. Colleen extended her hand. "The cabinet code, Mara. Do not drag this into something uglier." "It does not use a code," I said. "It uses prints." "Then give Mr. Hale your authorization to open the audit screen." That got my attention. Mr. Hale was not the deputy. He was standing near the coffee station in a gray blazer clinic software consultant, the man Colleen had called in to make this look official. I had known him for 3 years. He installed our updated record system. He also hated being used as window dressing. He met my eyes once briefly and looked away. "Good," I said. "Open it." Colleen smiled, relieved now that the script had resumed. "You see. She knows there is no other way." Dylan moved aside with a little flourish, and Mr. Hale stepped to the cabinet terminal. He tapped his credentials, opened the compliance dashboard, and projected the audit screen to the wall monitor above the prep table. The room fell silent. Inventory history filled the screen in neat columns. Drug name, unit count, access time, staff ID, fingerprint confirmation. Colleen turned toward the monitor with the confidence of a woman who had rehearsed outrage but never consequences. Mr. Hale cleared his throat. "The first discrepancy appears on April 9th, at 1:14 a.m, he said. 1 ketamine vial removed under staff profile Dylan Mercer." Dylan blinked. "What?" Mr. Hale kept scrolling. April 12th, 11:52 p.m. Midazolam removed under Dylan Mercer. April 17th, 12:36 a.m. Butorphanol removed under Dylan Mercer. April 21st, ketamine removed under Dylan Mercer. April 29th, ketamine removed under Dylan Mercer. The screen looked merciless, which is another way of saying it looked accurate. Colleen turned on me so fast the pearl earring at her left ear swung hard. "You manipulated that." "No," I said. "The cabinet logs cannot be edited from a staff account. You told me that was a waste of money when Dad installed it." Dylan stepped toward the monitor. "That is impossible. I use the cabinet for emergencies." "Everyone knows that." I nodded. "Yes. That is why I kept the loading bay camera clips that match every one of those access times." Now the room changed. Not all at once. Not like in a movie. Trust does not explode. It tilts. One face changes, then another, then the air itself seems to realize it has been standing on the wrong side of the room. Mr. Hale looked at me. "You have the video." I took the clinic tablet off the counter, opened the folder I had prepared 2 nights earlier, and handed it to him. The first clip showed Dylan at 12:36 a.m. Hoodie up, cap low, entering the treatment room after midnight on a night with no emergency appointments. He unlocked the cabinet, pocketed a vial, then went out the loading bay instead of back through the clinic. The second clip showed him at 1:14 a.m., passing a small cooler to a man in a truck with a race trailer attached. The third clip was the ugliest. Dylan standing by the exercise yard fence, whispering into his phone that our old man would never notice a few drops missing, and that if anyone asked, he would say, "I had been erratic since hospice started." Mrs. Alvarez covered her mouth. The deputy stepped closer to the monitor. Dylan went pale, then angry, because weak men always prefer anger once fear makes them look small. "She was spying on me," he snapped. "This proves nothing. Those were horse sedatives for a rescue intake. Mom, tell them." But Colleen was no longer looking at him. She was staring at the screen as if it had personally betrayed her. Then she did what she always did when a lie cracked. She tried to build a bigger one on top of it. Even if Dylan made a mistake, she said sharply, that does not change the ownership issue. Reed wanted the clinic to stay in the family. Dylan can still take over operations while we sort this out. Mara is emotional. She is vindictive. She should never have access to these records without oversight. There it was. The pivot. If the theft story failed, then we would move to authority. To title. To who got to decide what counted as family. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder I had never seen before. A transfer authorization bank draft, and what looked like an emergency operating loan proposal. I realized then just how much she had intended to finish before sunset. Hand me your signature, your silence, and your father's life work. All before the memorial flowers wilted. This clinic cannot survive under her, Colleen announced to the room. Dylan has investors ready. The bank has a bridge solution. We are preserving the asset. Preserving the asset. That was the line that finally made me smile. Because I knew something she did not. I knew the only reason she had chosen a public room was to corner me. I also knew public rooms cut both ways. I turned toward the doorway. Mrs. Duval, you should come in now. My mother's face emptied. Vivian Duval stepped out from the hallway beside the surgery suite where she had apparently been standing long enough to hear every false syllable. She was in her late 60s, silver-haired, straight-backed, and impossible to rush. In one hand, she carried a leather file case. In the other was the sealed packet my father had asked me to protect. I did not tell you to bring her, Colleen said. No, Mrs. Duval replied. Reed Mercer did. She came to the prep table, set down the packet, and addressed the room with the calm of a woman who has spent 3 decades watching greedy people mistake noise for leverage. Since Mrs. Mercer has made ownership claims, filed accusations against Dr. Mara Mercer, and attempted to initiate a management transfer on the day of Mr. Reed Mercer's interment, I am authorized to open the estate directive executed 6 months ago. Colleen laughed once, too sharp. Reed was medicated. He was sick. He did not know what he was signing. Mrs. Duval did not even dignify that. She broke the seal, removed the documents, and laid them out one by one on the stainless prep counter beneath the wall monitor that still showed Dylan's midnight fingerprint entries. First, she said amendment to the Mercer Clinic operating charter. Effective immediately upon Mr. Mercer's death, sole voting control and medical directorship passed to Dr. Mara Mercer. Dylan stared at her like she had started speaking underwater. Second transfer deed for Mercer Animal Clinic, the boarding barn, and the adjoining half-acre kennel lot recorded with the county 6 months ago. Grantee Mara Mercer. Colleen took one step back. Third, trust forfeiture clause. Any beneficiary who files a knowingly false criminal complaint against Dr. Mara Mercer, tampers with clinic records, or attempts to coerce an ownership transfer contrary to the amended charter, forfeits his or her remaining distribution under the Reed Mercer estate. The silence after that felt clean. Not comfortable. Not kind. Just clean. The kind that comes when rot has finally been cut out, and everybody in the room can smell fresh wood underneath. My mother looked from the deed to the monitor to Dylan to me. She had built her whole strategy on one belief that I would still be the old version of myself, the one who rushed in to patch every leak before strangers noticed the house was sinking. You did this, she whispered. I met her eyes. No, Dad did. I just followed instructions. Dylan slammed his palm against the prep table. This is insane. She set me up. She wanted those logs. She wanted me on camera. I almost laughed then, because at last he was close to understanding the shape of the trap, but still too stupid to see the door he had walked through on his own. No, Dylan, I said. You wanted access. You wanted after-hours control. You wanted me quiet because you thought grief would make me slow. All I did was stop cleaning behind you. The deputy looked to Mrs. Duval, then to Mr. Hale, then back at the videos, and printed logs on the counter. He had enough now. Enough for a report. Enough for probable cause. Enough to stop being decorative. Sir, he said to Dylan, I'm going to need you to step away from the table. Colleen finally broke. Not into tears, not at first. Into fury. Raw, childish, humiliating fury. This clinic exists because I stood by Reed, she said. Because I brought in clients. Because I hosted dinners and fundraisers and kept this family respectable while she hid in exam rooms covered in dog hair. You cannot do this to me on the day I buried my husband. That line might have worked if she had not spent the last 20 minutes trying to bury me with him. Mrs. Duval closed the file and said, very quietly, Reed expected this exact performance, which is why he changed everything while he still could. Mr. Hale unplugged the tablet and handed it back to me, like it was no longer evidence of scandal, but simply what it had always been, a tool that belonged in the right hands. Dylan tried one last turn toward me. Mara, come on. You know Mom panics. You know I just needed help. We can fix it. We can say the logs are training errors that Dad gave verbal approval. Do not do this over a few vials. That was the moment I understood something that had been true since childhood. In his mind, there was no amount he could steal that would ever count if it came from me. No line he crossed would ever feel real until someone made him stand still long enough to see it. I looked at the deputy. The loading bay footage includes license plates. The cabinet logs are backed up to the cloud. The clinic card Dylan used to buy feed last week also paid a racing stable invoice in Ridgeland. If you pull the statement from my office printer, page 3 is highlighted. The deputy gave me a short nod. Mrs. Alvarez spoke then, her voice trembling with anger rather than confusion now. Dr. Mara sat with my dog for 6 hours when his blood sugar crashed last July. She did not steal a thing. I want that in your report. After that, the room turned the rest of the way. One client after another began talking. About the night I stitched a hound after a gator cut. About the deployment families whose pets I boarded at a discount. About my father telling everyone for years that I was the one who would keep the place standing. It was not dramatic. It was better. It was a ledger being read aloud by people who had witnessed the entries. When the deputy took Dylan by the arm, my brother did not fight. He looked dazed, like a man who had walked onto a stage expecting applause and found inventory instead. My mother lasted longer. She always did. She demanded another attorney. She accused Vivian of elder exploitation. She said Reed had been manipulated. She said grief made children cruel. She said I would regret humiliating my own blood in public. At that, Mrs. Duval finally gave her something that looked almost like pity. No, Colleen, she said. Public is what you chose. That ended it. By noon, Dylan was in a cruiser. Colleen was being escorted off the property after Mrs. Duval informed her that the trust clause applied immediately, and that any further interference with clinic operations would be treated as trespass. Mr. Hale stayed just long enough to copy the compliance log for the deputy, then told me quietly that my father had been a better businessman than people gave him credit for. I looked around the treatment room once everyone was gone. The paper cups were still on the counter. The memorial cake knife sat by the sink unwashed. There was dirt on the floor from the rescue volunteers' boots. Somebody had left a casserole dish by the autoclave because in the South, grief and food are roommates. For the first time all morning, the clinic felt like mine enough to breathe in. I went to my father's office, opened the firebox with the old brass key, and took out the ledger he kept for 30 years. On the inside cover, he had written one sentence in blue ink. The person who stays owns more than the person who talks. I sat in his chair and let that sentence settle. Then I stood up and got back to work. At 1:15, a shepherd mix named June came in for suture removal. At 2, a child brought a bearded dragon that had stopped eating. At 4, a boarded old lab named Samson needed his arthritis injection and wanted exactly 2 biscuits after. The clinic did not care that my family had detonated in the prep room. Animals never do. They only care whether the right hands are steady. Mine were. That evening, I changed the staff access list on the drug cabinet. I removed Dylan. I removed my mother from the building alarm. I updated the banking authority and signed the first page of the new operating ledger as sole director. Then I walked through the boarding barn while the sun went down over the marsh and listened to the dogs settle one kennel at a time. No shouting, no speeches, no victory dance. Just the sound of a life no longer being drained by people who called that love. My mother texted at 9:17. You made your point. Let your brother come home. I blocked the number without replying. At 9:21, Mrs. Duval forwarded me the first notice from the estate accountant. Due to the forfeiture clause, the discretionary trust distribution previously intended for Colleen and Dylan would now be reallocated to the clinic endowment, the rescue fund, and a scholarship for local veterinary students. That would have pleased my father more than revenge ever could. Still, I would be lying if I said I felt nothing. I felt balance. Not joy. Not forgiveness. Just the clean, hard weight of a scale, finally resting where it should have been years ago. Before I locked up, I walked through the waiting room and stopped beneath the framed photo of my father holding a muddy calf on the day he opened the clinic. He looked younger than I ever really knew him, tired and proud, and a little stunned by what work had made possible. You were right, I said to the empty room. They did commit first. Then I switched off the lights. Outside the parking lot was dark, except for the security lamps over the kennel fence. June bugs tapped against the glass. Somewhere in the back, Samson gave one old man's sigh and settled down again. I did not save my mother. I did not save my brother. I did not even try to make their fall softer. I just stopped putting my body underneath it. That was enough.